Hey, Witch Mob, welcome to the Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast. This week, two things are happening. The first is that this episode is about you and your questions. The second is that this is the final episode of season 1. We're going to take a 3-week break from reading stories from Travel Tales I Never Told Mom. We're halfway through the book now, and we'll get to the other half in season 2. I've received quite a lot of questions, and some of the questions were asked by several people, and so I'm going to do my best to answer those questions as honestly as possible. Hopefully you'll enjoy this episode, and if you have any other questions for future episodes, send them along to thewitchmob@gmail.com with your name and where you're from, and in a future episode we might do some more questions. Enjoy listening to these questions right after a word from our sponsor. Secret Garden is a 5-star vegan and vegetarian restaurant where you can have an incredible chef-to-table experience for breakfast, lunch or dinner. Our chef is an expert in food allergies and intolerances and can cater to any dietary need from gluten, sugar or dairy-free to creating a low FODMAPs menu or catering to any other dietary requirements you have. Stop by Secret Garden for an amazing meal or order online and pick up anytime. Grab a dessert or an ice cream while you're there. Groups are welcome with a reservation, and you can discuss a custom-made menu for your event with the chef. Secret Garden has an extensive menu with excellent prices, and you won't be disappointed. Mention the Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast for a complimentary drink. Some of the questions that you've sent in are actually quite hard questions to answer, and you may not even like the answers that I have, but I would like to remind you that all of the stories that I'm reading are coming out of a book called Travel Tales I Never Told Mom. There's a reason I never told my mother, and obviously she's read this book by now and probably heard a lot of these stories. But some of the answers that you're going to hear could be triggers, so there are trigger warnings about sexual assault, domestic violence, and child abuse. Just remember that the book is about stories that I never told my mother, and there was always very good reasons for that.
Apologies in advance for the atrocious sound quality and weird background noises throughout this episode. None of us can figure out what happened. Maybe it's the shitty equipment or the wild thunderstorm that messed up the power. It could just be us and our lack of talent regarding sound editing. Or there might even be an insect in the microphone. After all, this is the jungle. We'll try to do better next time. Meantime, here are the answers to your questions.
Our first question today comes from Luis in Ecuador.
Why do you travel?
Why do I travel? I've traveled my whole life. I'm an army brat, so we moved around a lot when I was a child, and when we were living in the place where we moved to, we would travel all around that area to explore that area, so we were traveling a lot, camping a lot in those kinds of situations. And then when I got older, that culture of travel that my parents had taught me made me more curious about what else was out there. And so I started traveling. First I went to Asia, and then I went to Europe. I wanted to see the world. I wanted to see what else was out there. I wanted to explore new cultures and new foods. I became a chef when I was very young, so I wanted to explore new cuisines. So cultures, cuisines, music, art, traditions. I was very interested in indigenous cultures. There's a lot of reasons that I travel. Our second question comes from Isabelle in France.
Are you afraid of death?
Am I afraid of death? That's an interesting question, actually. Am I afraid of death? Well, it's inevitable. It's going to happen. There's nothing we can do to stop it. It's just a matter of when. So I feel like there's not a lot of point in being afraid of it. No, I'm not really afraid of death. But I feel like there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to do while I'm still alive. And it would be a great shame if I died before I got all those things done. And I'm not doing them for anybody else. It's just for me. But I'd like to live long enough to do all the things on my bucket list. Question number 3 comes from Claire in the USA.
Do you have any pet travel hates?
Do I have any pet travel hates? Oh, the thing with the shoes at the airport is absolute insanity. I can't stand that. It makes zero sense to me that you have to take your shoes off in a public place where there's thousands of feet. It's disgusting. I'm a little bit of a germaphobe, so I find that absolutely disgusting. So many people asked question 4.
What's the favorite country that you ever went to?
A lot of people ask me this question all the time, and my general answer is that each country has something different to offer. Each country is literally its own place, and it's got food and people and culture and traditions and art and customs that are different to the country next door even. And so it's really hard to say that I have a favorite place. The only things that I could say is that I spent quite a lot of time in the Middle East, and I've spent quite a lot of time in Ecuador. So if there's a favorite, but I also love Asia. So, having a favorite country, I don't have a favorite country. Question 5 comes from Navi in India.
Have you ever been arrested?
Have I ever been arrested? No, I've never been arrested. I've been detained. I was detained in Thailand once because some police mistook me for a known drug dealer, and that was a hairy experience. And I was detained in Ecuador once when somebody stole my passport. That's actually in episode 4 of the podcast if you want to hear more details about what happened there. Marco from Spain asked question 6, and so did a couple of other people actually.
What is your favorite story from your book?
What's my favorite story from my book? My favorite story in season 1, because I have 2 favorite stories in my book. So from season 1, my favorite story is the bookmark, because in the beginning of the story, you don't really know where this bookmark came from. But by the end of the story, you understand that it was a large piece of my ass. And I kind of think that's funny. I like that story. And in season 2, my favorite story takes place in Syria, where I was taken hostage by a family there. And if you want to know what happened there, you're going to have to tune in to season 2. A few different people asked question 7.
Since you've been traveling to so many places, what food is your favorite food?
My favorite food. Okay, so I'm a chef. I cook food from all over the world. But my favorite food to prepare is probably Asian food because it's so fresh and so fast. It's kind of like healthy fast food. But I also love Middle Eastern food. I love a hummus, a baba ganoush, a falafel. But I also love a lasagna or a moussaka. I will often make a menemen or some kind of eggplant dish that comes from Turkey. To have one specific favorite food is difficult because there's a lot of food. But my favorite to cook, because it's so fresh and so full of vegetables, is food from Asia. Debbie from Australia asks question 8.
What's your favorite way to travel?
My favorite way to travel is probably by train. I love the motion of the train as you're traveling. I love that you can look out the window. I've traveled in trains in India, Europe, the UK, Turkey. I like trains. Episode 6 has a story about travelling on a train, and that's a hard story, but it's probably the worst thing that ever happened to me on a train. All my other train trips, for example, travelling around India on a train was spectacular, and at the time I was reading Paul Thoreau's Great Railway Bazaar, which takes place on the trains in India, so that felt like a good book to read at that time, and I loved travelling on those trains. I've been all over Europe, through the UK. Actually, there are 2 gorgeous train stations in Istanbul. One is Sirkeci and the other one is Haydarpasa, and I've got on trains in both of those stations. I love a train. It's my favourite way to travel. Well, question 9 isn't pulling any punches, is it? Question 9 comes from Angie in the USA.
Was it hard to see a man die?
So now we're talking about episode 13, which took place in Ukraine, Vladimir versus vodka. So this man raped a minor, and the only thing I can really say about that is anybody who hurts a child doesn't deserve a space on planet Earth. And that may be a harsh opinion, but that's how I feel about it. As a survivor of child sexual abuse, I feel like anybody who hurts a child just shouldn't exist. I think those people just shouldn't exist. So what I can say is, was it hard to see him die? No, it wasn't. The hard part was keeping that inside my head and not talking about it with anybody for many, many years, for decades. That was the hardest part of that, not being able to talk about it, not being able to tell anybody. That was really hard, and then finally writing the story down was the first part, and then years and years and years later I put it in that book, and then even more years later I read it out loud. So I feel like I'm at peace with this story now. Question number 10 comes from Nor in Norway.
Out of all the different kinds of people and cultures you've encountered, what country or kind of people would you say is the nicest and also the rudest?
I think that some of the nicest people I've ever met were in Cambodia, and it kind of surprised me because I had just come from Vietnam, where people there, 20 plus years ago when their tourism had just begun, people there were quite terse and rude and didn't really understand how tourism works. I'm sure they've changed now, but back then it was a hard country. And then I arrived in Cambodia, and I did kind of understand these people have gone through decades and decades of war and all kinds of horrors, and they were bitter about it. And I kind of get that on one level. So when I arrived in Cambodia, I was kind of expecting the people to be the same, and they were not. They were not at all. They were gentle and kind and quiet, and everybody had lost somebody. Everybody had lost a mother, a father, an aunt, a son, a brother, or more, some their entire families, and yet they were still gentle and kind and welcoming. And that really surprised me, but it was also probably one of the most amazing experiences I've ever had with people, because after being so badly traumatized for so long, they still found the strength and courage and fortitude to continue being kind to other people. And I think that is in itself a strength that I really admire. So I have always admired the Cambodian people for the amount of grace that they carried despite the traumas that they experienced. As for rude countries, well, the people in European countries can be quite terse. People can be very unfriendly, very impatient, and if you don't speak their language, they absolutely have no interest in interacting with you whatsoever. But I've never taken that personally, because seriously, if people want tourism in their country, they'll treat people properly. That's how tourism should be. If they want to welcome people and earn money as a result of welcoming people, then they need to learn to be nice. And if they can't, then just don't go to those countries. It's very simple. We vote with our dollars in where we choose to go and travel. And so if there's a country full of rude people, why would you go there? Why would you spend your tourism dollars there? There are other much nicer places to go with nicer people. And so, yeah, there's a few countries where I found the people to be quite rude. But for the most part, I think people are friendly and welcoming and nice. And there's really not a country that I would say don't go to. Paula from Australia asks question 11.
Is there a country that you would never go back to?
A country I would never go back to. That's interesting because Azerbaijan pops into my head from episode 7, but that was the dumb friend that I travelled with who got us into trouble there and not the country itself. So I can't really blame Azerbaijan for the horrific experience I had. I was also in Iran in 1997 and I'm not rushing to get back. The way that I was treated outside of the event that I attended as a woman, I would not go back to Iran again. Question 12 came from lots of different people.
How many countries have you actually visited? Are you even able to count them? Is there something that's still on your bucket list? A country you haven't visited or something you haven't done yet that you'd like to do?
How many countries have I visited? I can say I have set foot in 46 countries. That doesn't mean I spent a lot of time. Some of them I went to work in for a day or two, so it doesn't really count as travel. My travel operandus was to get a job and stick around and work and make some money and get to know the area and then save enough money to move on to the next spot. So I would spend quite some time in several places. I've lived in a few different countries long term. Obviously, I've lived in Australia. At this point, I think Tasmania should be declared a whole different country. I've lived in Tasmania as well. I've also lived in Turkey and Mexico. I've lived in Ecuador. I've lived in England, Holland, Indonesia and Canada for a short time. Other places I've travelled for months or even years include Asia, Europe, the Middle East, even Australia. I spent my first travel years bopping around my own country. Travelled a lot in Asia, visiting places like Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, Cambodia, Vietnam, Burma before it was Myanmar, Borneo, Laos. I've also set foot in Taiwan and the Philippines. I've spent time in India, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. I've just spent life travelling and working, and I've lived and worked in all kinds of places. That's how I travelled for so long. As for bucket list, my bucket list includes walking along the Great Wall of China. I would like to see Victoria Falls. I would also like to revisit a couple of places like Cappadocia with a magical fairyland. I'd also love to spend more time in more Mediterranean countries. And I'd like to go back to Africa. I've been to Morocco. There is a story about that coming up. But I would like to go to some other countries. I have a friend who lives in Cairo I'd love to visit. I have a friend in South Africa that I would love to visit. So there's a few places I haven't been yet that, yes, I would really love to go like that. So Marlene from Germany has question number 13, and apparently Marlene likes to ask very hard questions.
What is the worst thing that ever happened to you when you were traveling?
The worst thing that ever happened to me while I was traveling. Okay, since we're all being so honest. In the 90s, I was beaten up and raped in Amsterdam. And a few years after that, late 90s, I was stalked around a castle in Romania by a lunatic that was trying to hurt me. So I guess the worst thing that has really happened has been being attacked by men being stalked, being groped, being molested in lots of different countries. As a woman traveling alone, that's an experience that used to be inevitable, but I feel like now women are more equipped to stand up for ourselves, and even though we have that freeze, flight, fight response, I think more of us need to learn to fight back. And I can honestly say that I have decked a few men and put them on the ground because they touched me inappropriately. And I don't think that's a bad thing. Shout, yell, draw attention to the person harming them, because it is harm and it's trauma and it causes PTSD. So I feel like these men that come and harass us need to be put in their place. And I think that nowadays women are more equipped to do that. Lots of people asked question 14.
Do you speak any other languages?
Yes. The short answer is yes. So the very first language I learned was Indonesian, Selamat Pagi. And then I learned Turkish, Günaydın. And then I learned Spanish, Buenos Dias. But my native tongue is English, good morning. And I learned a smattering of other words and phrases in various different languages so that I could have a few things to say to local people. Not fluently, but just to get by, just to be able to say good morning, sawadee ka, khop kun ka in Thailand, things like this. So I would have a little bit of vocabulary just to interact with people. But I learned to speak 4 languages, and currently I'm fluent in Spanish and obviously English. And the Turkish and the Indonesian are in the back of my hard drive in my brain and will probably come out if I ever use those languages again. But they're back there sitting unused for the time being. Actually, back when I was learning Spanish, I was translating from Turkish into Spanish because the grammatical formulas were similar. They were closer in Turkish to Spanish than they are in English. And so in the very beginning of learning Spanish, I was actually translating from Turkish.
And question 15 comes from Wendy in Canada.
Do you think you would get away with some of the things you did 30 years ago today?
Do I think I'd get away with some of the things I did 30 years ago today? Absolutely not. We'd probably have to go back to question 5 and I'd be arrested for sure. So no, I don't think I would get away with a lot of those things. If you want to know what the things are, you probably need to listen to the podcast or read the book. Question 16 is from Signe in Denmark.
Have you ever been on an adventure or travel that wasn't insane?
No, I don't think so. When I heard this question for the first time, I was trying to think if I've ever been on a trip anywhere where things didn't get crazy. And I think the answer to that is no. I can't think of a single trip, even a weekend trip, where things didn't get insane. So I think this follows me around. Maybe I'm just some kind of freak magnet that attracts all kinds of weirdness and strangeness. But I think no, every time I go somewhere or do anything, crazy things happen. And so it seems to follow me around. Question 17 came from Melanie in Belgium.
Are there any other really fond memories you haven't told in the book and that you'd like to talk about in this podcast where you answer people's questions?
I actually have a lot of memories, and because so many people love this book and the stories in this book, I am working on a second book, which is almost finished, with another 35 travel stories. And the second book is called OMFG, Travel Tales I'm Never Telling Mom. And I'm hoping that it will be finished in the next few months. So yes, I do have a lot of fond memories that aren't in this book, but enough of them to go into a second book. Question 18 is from Katie in the UK.
What's the longest time you've ever spent in a country and the shortest time?
The longest time I've ever spent in a country is 17 years in Ecuador. And the shortest time was a 24-hour work trip to Moscow, which I don't really talk about very often because it was just basically a meeting. I went to a meeting for a day and came back to Istanbul. So that's the shortest time I've ever spent in a country, is just under 24 hours in Moscow in Russia. Question 19 also comes from Melanie in Belgium. Melanie had lots of questions to ask.
Are there any things that you regret doing or not doing?
Are there any things I regret doing or not doing? You mean besides getting married? Travel-wise, I'd like to think that I don't really have a lot of regrets, but there is one story that's coming up in season 2. I took a gig as a tour guide, and I tried to advise the people that I was with to do some certain things, and they refused to do them, and we ended up in a lot of trouble. And I kind of regret not forcing the situation more to keep us safer. It's actually going to be the first episode of season 2, which took place in Kurdistan and is called Bombs Away, for very good reasons. And so I guess I regret not insisting that we don't stay where we stayed. But apart from that, I try not to have regrets, because having regrets seems to me like a waste of time and emotion that could be served elsewhere. Our last question comes from Helen in the UK. Question number 20.
You've spent many years traveling, but how often do you go back to your own country?
How often do I go back to my own country? When I first started traveling 40 years ago, I would go back every couple of years, but lately I haven't been back for 10 years. I don't feel the need to go back. I feel I built a home here where I am in Ecuador, and I have everything I need. I have no plans to go back to my own country. I don't miss anything enough to make me want to go. I mean, there is a jar of Vegemite in the cupboard, and what really else do you need from Australia than a jar of Vegemite? Now that we have communication, anybody can video call me anytime they want, or just call me. Everybody I know in Australia knows how to get in touch with me. They can message or call at any time. We can do video call to see each other at any time. So modern technology has kind of taken away the need to be in anybody's physical presence. And I'm content here. I'm happy here. So I have no plans to go anywhere for a little while.
Hey there, love bugs! Welcome to the jungle! I'm Nancy Miarelli, your guide to the ecological and entomological, i.e. bug, wonders of Ecuador. With my master's in entomology and a passion for ecology and conservation, I'm here to take you on an unforgettable adventure through the mega diverse forests and more lush than you may have expected mountainsides of Ecuador. This year, I'm excited to offer 2 unique science-focused tours. Join me for a nature journaling course where we'll sit in the grass, sketch, observe, and reflect on all the creatures and plants that we discovered. Or dive deep into evolutionary theory on my evolution tour, where you'll see what you learned in a book that one time growing on the side of a tree. Ready to embark on a journey of discovery? Visit www.scibugs.info, that is Scibugs, SCIBUGS, to learn more or find me, Scibugs, everywhere on the internet. Let's explore Ecuador and all it has to offer together.
There's a whole lot of few, R, and oo in all of those questions and answers. Some of those questions are actually quite hard. Very interesting questions. I appreciate everyone making the effort to write in or record their questions. That was amazing. I hope you enjoyed the answers to your questions. We'll be back on the 5th of May with episode 19, a crazy story that takes place in Kurdistan, and it's called Bombs Away. Grab a copy of the book so you can read along for season 2 of the Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast. We'll see you then. Until then, enjoy. Do you have any crazy travel stories? What's the most insane thing that happened to you while you were on the road? If you'd like to share, send an MP3 recording of your story or write it into an email and send it to thewitchmob@gmail.com, and it could feature in a future episode. Don't forget to pick up your Who Is This Crazy Hag stickers and totes from Redbubble. Links are in the show notes. The Who Is This Crazy Hag podcast is created, written, read, produced, edited, mixed and published by Ronnie. If you'd like to grab a copy of Few Are Oo, find the paperback on Amazon or email thewitchpod@gmail.com to get an ebook. Also, let us know via email or on Blue Sky at The Witch Pod if you're reading in a book club or a group of friends so we can give you a shout out. Don't forget to tell us where you are in the world. You can visit The Witch Pod on Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music and Castbox, and also Substack and Patreon. See you next week.